The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long golden rays across the polished marble floors. 8-year-old Princess Charlotte was supposed to be in her morning lessons with her tutor, Mrs. Henderson, but instead she found herself wandering the quiet corridors of the East Wing. Her small feet made soft padding sounds against the cold stone as she explored areas of the palace she rarely visited. Charlotte had always been curious about the parts of her home that were usually off-limits. Today, while her brothers Prince George and Prince Louis were occupied with their own activities, she had slipped away from the schoolroom during a brief break. Mrs. Henderson had stepped out to fetch some books, and Charlotte saw her chance for adventure. The East Wing was older than the rest of the palace, with narrow hallways and rooms that hadn't been renovated in decades. Dust particles danced in the morning light, and the air smelled of old wood and forgotten memories. Charlotte's royal blue dress swished as she walked, her curious eyes taking in every detail of the unfamiliar surroundings. She passed several closed doors, each one making her wonder what secrets lay behind them. Some had old brass nameplates that were too tarnished to read clearly. Others had keyholes that looked like they hadn't been used in years. The palace was full of history, and Charlotte loved discovering new pieces of that puzzle. As she rounded a corner, Charlotte noticed something unusual. There was a door slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of a room beyond. Unlike the other doors in this wing, this one seemed to beckon her forward. She could hear a faint sound coming from inside, like someone moving papers around or perhaps rummaging through old boxes. Her natural curiosity got the better of her, and she approached the door carefully. Charlotte had been taught proper royal protocol and knew she shouldn't enter rooms without permission, but the mystery was too tempting to resist. She pressed her small face closer to the gap and tried to peer inside. The room appeared to be some kind of storage area, filled with old furniture covered in white sheets and boxes stacked high against the walls. But what caught her attention was movement in the shadows. Someone was definitely in there, and they seemed to be searching for something specific. Charlotte's heart began to beat faster. She knew all the palace staff by sight, and this person didn't seem familiar. They were dressed in dark clothes and moved in a way that seemed secretive, almost sneaky. The person was going through boxes methodically, as if looking for something particular. She should have turned around and gone back to her lessons. She should have found a guard or told someone what she had seen. But Charlotte was only 8 years old, and her curiosity was stronger than her caution. She pushed the door open just a little bit more to get a better look. The hinges made a small creaking sound, and the person in the room froze. Charlotte held her breath, pressing herself against the doorframe. For a moment, everything was completely silent except for the distant sounds of palace life echoing from other parts of the building. Then, the person turned around, and Charlotte gasped. It wasn't a palace staff member at all. It was a man she had never seen before, wearing a maintenance uniform that looked authentic, but somehow didn't quite fit right. He had a thin face with sharp eyes that darted nervously around the room, and when he saw Charlotte peeking through the door, those eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like panic. "Who are you?" Charlotte asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Royal children were taught to be confident and speak clearly, but something about this situation made her feel uncertain. The man stared at her for a long moment, clearly recognizing who she was. Every person who worked in the palace knew the faces of the royal children. His expression changed from surprise to something more calculating, and Charlotte felt a chill run down her spine. "Just doing some cleaning, Your Highness," the man said, but his voice sounded forced and unnatural. He gestured vaguely at the boxes around him. "Organizing some old storage." Charlotte had spent enough time around palace staff to know when someone was lying. The real maintenance workers had a different way of speaking, more comfortable and familiar. This man seemed nervous and kept glancing toward a window as if planning something. "I don't think you're supposed to be here," Charlotte said, surprising herself with her boldness. "What are you looking for in those boxes?" The man took a step toward her, and Charlotte instinctively stepped back. Something was very wrong about this situation, and every instinct she had was telling her to run. But she was also a princess, and princesses were taught to be brave even when they were scared. "Why don't you come in here for a moment, princess?" the man said, and His voice had an edge to it that made Charlotte's stomach clench with fear. "We can talk about what you think you saw." That was when Charlotte knew she was in real danger. Palace staff never spoke to the royal children in that tone, never suggested they do anything that might put them at risk. This man was definitely not supposed to be here, and whatever he was doing was something bad. Charlotte turned and ran. Her small legs carried her as fast as they could down the corridor, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Behind her, she heard the man curse and start to follow. His adult legs were much longer than hers, and she could hear his footsteps getting closer. The hallways that had seemed so interesting and mysterious just minutes before now felt like a maze. Charlotte had to think quickly about which way to go. She needed to find help, needed to find a guard or her protection officer, but she was in a part of the palace that was usually empty during the day. She could hear the man behind her, not running but walking quickly, trying not to make too much noise. He was probably hoping to catch her before she could alert anyone. Charlotte's mind raced as she tried to remember the layout of this wing and figure out the fastest way to safety. As she turned another corner, Charlotte realized she was getting closer to the main part of the palace where there would be more people. But she was also getting tired, and her short legs couldn't carry her much further at this speed. She needed help, and she needed it now. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte did something she had been taught to do in emergencies but had never actually used. She called out at the top of her voice, using all the breath and projection training she had received for public speaking. "Help! Help me! Someone help!" Her clear, strong voice echoed off the stone walls and carried down the hallway. The effect was immediate. She heard doors opening in the distance, voices calling out, and, most importantly, the sound of running feet heading in her direction. The palace security system was designed to respond instantly to any cry for help, especially from one of the royal children. Behind her, she heard the man curse again, and then the sound of his footsteps changing direction. He was running away, probably trying to escape before security arrived. But Charlotte kept running toward the sounds of help, her voice continuing to call out until she saw the first uniformed figure appear around the corner ahead of her. It was Sergeant James Morrison, one of the royal protection officers she knew well. His face was serious and alert as he ran toward her, speaking rapidly into his radio to coordinate with other security personnel. "Princess Charlotte," he called as he reached her. "What's wrong? What's happened?" Charlotte was breathing hard and felt tears starting in her eyes, but she forced herself to explain clearly what she had seen. "There's a man in the storage room in the East Wing. He's not supposed to be there. He was looking through boxes, and he tried to get me to come into the room with him. He's dressed like maintenance, but he's not real staff." Sergeant Morrison's expression became even more serious as he listened. He was already coordinating with other officers through his radio, sending teams to search the East Wing and secure all exits. The palace's security protocols were extremely thorough, and any potential threat was taken with maximum seriousness. "You did exactly the right thing, Princess," he told her, his voice calm and reassuring even as he continued to manage the security response. "You were brave and smart to run and call for help. We're going to make sure you're safe and find out who this person was." Within minutes, the East Wing was surrounded by security personnel, and a full search was underway. Charlotte was escorted to a secure area where her parents could be contacted and where she would be safe while the situation was handled. As she sat in the comfortable chair in the security office, wrapped in a soft blanket and sipping warm tea that one of the staff had brought her, Charlotte thought about what had just happened. She had been scared, but she had also been brave. She had trusted her instincts when something felt wrong, and she had known how to get help when she needed it. The incident was far from over, and there would be many questions to answer and security procedures to review. But for now, Charlotte was safe, and the mysterious intruder was being hunted by some of the most skilled security professionals in the world. Her adventure in the East Wing had turned into something much more serious than she had ever imagined, but it had also shown her that the training and protocols she sometimes found boring in her royal education were actually very important. When real danger had appeared, she had known exactly what to do. As she waited for her parents to arrive, Charlotte wondered who the man had been and what he had been looking for in those old storage boxes. Little did she know that this incident was just the beginning of a much larger mystery that would unfold over the coming days, involving palace security, international intrigue, and secrets that had been hidden in Kensington Palace for decades. Sergeant James Morrison had been a royal protection officer for 12 years, but he had never seen Princess Charlotte look as shaken as she did in the security office that morning. As he coordinated the search efforts through his radio, he kept one eye on the young princess, making sure she felt safe and protected. The initial search of the East Wing had revealed several disturbing facts. The storage room Charlotte had described showed clear signs that someone had been systematically going through historical documents and artifacts. Boxes that should have been sealed were opened, and their contents had been carefully examined. Most concerning of all, the intruder had managed to enter the palace without triggering any of the standard security alarms. "Sir, we found evidence of entry through a service window on the ground floor," came the voice through Morrison's radio. "Looks like someone with professional skills bypassed the alarm system. No sign of the suspect on the grounds, but we're expanding the search perimeter." Morrison frowned as he absorbed this information. A professional break-in at Kensington Palace was extremely serious, especially one that had brought an intruder into contact with one of the royal children. This was no random burglary or confused tourist who had wandered into the wrong area. Princess Charlotte looked up from her teacup as she heard the radio chatter. Despite being only 8 years old, she was intelligent enough to understand that what had happened was more serious than a simple case of someone being in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Sergeant Morrison," she said quietly. "The man knew who I was. When he saw me, he recognized me right away. And he was looking for something specific in those boxes. He wasn't just randomly searching." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. The princess's observations were sharp and could be crucial to understanding what had happened. "Can you tell me exactly what you saw him doing when you first looked into the room?" Charlotte closed her eyes for a moment, trying to remember every detail. He had several boxes open, and he was looking through papers. Old papers, like documents or letters. He had them spread out on a table, and he was taking pictures of some of them with his phone. When I made noise at the door, he quickly started putting everything back. This was significant information. If the intruder had been photographing historical documents, it suggested either espionage or some form of research theft. The royal archives contained centuries of correspondence, treaties, and private papers that could be valuable to various parties for different reasons. Before Morrison could ask more questions, the door to the security office opened and Prince William and Catherine entered, their faces showing the controlled concern of parents who had received news that their child was in danger, but were trying to remain calm. "Charlotte," Catherine rushed to her daughter, wrapping her in a warm embrace. "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, Mummy," Charlotte replied, though her voice was still a bit shaky. "I got scared, but Sergeant Morrison and the other guards came really quickly when I called for help." Prince William shook hands with Morrison, his expression serious. "What's the situation, Sergeant? How did someone manage to get into the palace undetected?" Morrison gave a concise briefing on what they knew so far, including Charlotte's detailed observations about the intruder's behavior and apparent interest in historical documents. As he spoke, Prince William's expression grew more concerned. "Have we identified what documents he was examining?" Prince William asked. "We're working on that now, sir. The storage room contains materials dating back several centuries. We're bringing in archival specialists to determine if anything is missing and to identify what might have been photographed." Dr. Sarah Pemberton, the palace's chief archivist, arrived within the hour. She was a slight woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had spent 30 years cataloging and protecting the royal family's historical collections. When she examined the storage room, her usually calm demeanor showed clear signs of distress. "This is very troubling," she told Morrison and the royal couple as they stood outside the storage room. "The boxes that were opened contained some of our most sensitive historical materials. Letters between members of the royal family and foreign dignitaries, financial records from the 18th and 19th centuries, and some documents related to World War II that are still classified." Prince William exchanged a meaningful look with Catherine. Could any of those documents be politically sensitive or valuable to foreign governments? "Absolutely," Dr. Pemberton replied. "Some of the correspondence deals with military strategy, diplomatic negotiations, and economic agreements that could provide insights into how the royal family and the British government operate. In the wrong hands, such information could be quite valuable. Meanwhile, Charlotte sat quietly in the corner of the security office, listening to the adult conversation and trying to process what she was learning. The adventure that had started as simple curiosity about unexplored areas of her home was turning into something that involved national security and centuries-old secrets. Detective Inspector Helen Davies from the Metropolitan Police arrived to take over the criminal investigation. She was an experienced officer who specialized in high-security cases, and she immediately began coordinating with palace security to expand the investigation. Princess Charlotte, Detective Davies said gently as she sat down across from the young girl. I know you've already told Sergeant Morrison what happened, but I'd like you to tell me as well. Sometimes when we hear a story multiple times, we notice new details that might be important. Charlotte nodded seriously and began recounting her experience once more. As she spoke, Detective Davies took careful notes, occasionally asking for clarification about specific details. You said the man was taking pictures with his phone, Davies said. Can you describe the phone? Was it a regular phone or something different? Charlotte thought carefully. It looked like a normal phone, but it had a really good camera. When he was taking pictures of the papers, it made that clicking sound that cameras make, but it was very quiet. And he was holding it really steady, like he was used to taking pictures of documents. This detail suggested that the intruder had come prepared for exactly what he had done. Professional document photography required specific techniques and equipment to ensure clear, readable images. Over the next several hours, the investigation began to reveal a complex picture. Security footage from areas adjacent to the East Wing showed a figure in maintenance clothing who appeared to know exactly where he was going. The bypassing of the alarm system had been done with sophisticated knowledge of the palace's security setup. This wasn't opportunistic, Morrison explained to Prince William as they reviewed the preliminary findings. Someone planned this operation carefully. They knew which documents they were looking for, they knew how to access the building without triggering alarms, and they had the right equipment for photographing historical materials. The most disturbing revelation came when Dr. Pemberton finished her initial assessment of the disturbed documents. Several items appear to be missing, she reported. Not entire documents, but specific pages from larger collections. The thief knew exactly what they wanted and took only those specific items. Charlotte had been listening from her chair nearby, and she suddenly spoke up. When I saw him, he had some papers in his jacket pocket. I thought he was just putting them back in the wrong place, but maybe he was stealing them. Everyone in the room turned to look at her with new attention. This was a detail she hadn't mentioned before, and it could be crucial evidence. Can you remember which pocket? Detective Davies asked. And did you see how many papers? His left jacket pocket, Charlotte said confidently. And it looked like maybe 3 or 4 pages, folded up. They made his pocket look a little bumpy. This information immediately changed the nature of the investigation. If the intruder had physically stolen documents rather than just photographing them, it suggested either that the documents were too valuable to risk poor image quality, or that the theft was intended to be discovered as part of some larger plan. As the day wore on, security around the palace was increased dramatically. Additional protection officers were assigned to all family members, and access to the East Wing was completely restricted while the investigation continued. Charlotte found herself at the center of an intensive security review. Her daily routines, her lessons, and even her playtime would now include additional safety measures. The carefree exploration of her home that had led to the morning's discovery would no longer be possible. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner in their private quarters, the conversation naturally turned to the day's events. Prince George and Prince Louis had been briefed on what had happened in age-appropriate terms, and they were both impressed and worried about their sister's experience. Were you really scared when you saw the bad man? Prince Louis asked, his young eyes wide with concern and curiosity. Yes, I was scared, Charlotte admitted. But I remembered what we learned about what to do in emergencies. Running away and calling for help was the right thing to do. Prince William nodded approvingly. You showed excellent judgment, Charlotte. Recognizing that something was wrong and acting on that instinct kept you safe. But as the family discussed the day's events, They were all aware that the incident raised serious questions about palace security and the safety of the royal family. The fact that someone had penetrated the building so easily was deeply concerning, and the apparent professional nature of the operation suggested that this might be part of a larger threat. Detective Davies called that evening with an update that added another layer of complexity to the case. "We've reviewed security footage from the surrounding area," she reported. "The suspect appears to have had help. There were at least 2 other individuals positioned outside the palace during the break-in, possibly acting as lookouts or backup." This meant that the royal family was dealing not with a lone intruder, but with an organized group that had planned and executed a sophisticated operation. The investigation was expanding rapidly, involving multiple law enforcement agencies and intelligence services. As Charlotte lay in her bed that night, with additional security officers stationed outside her room, she thought about how a simple morning exploration had uncovered something so serious. She wondered what secrets had been hidden in those old documents, and why someone would risk so much to steal them. Little did she know that the documents stolen that morning contained information that would lead to international diplomatic complications and reveal connections between current political events and historical secrets that powerful people had worked decades to keep hidden. 3 days after the break-in, Detective Inspector Helen Davies received a call that would change everything about the investigation. Dr. Pemberton had made a discovery while cataloging the exact documents that had been stolen, and the implications were far more serious than anyone had initially realized. "You need to see this immediately," Dr. Pemberton said, her voice tight with concern. "I've identified the specific documents that were taken, and they're not just historically significant. They could cause a major international incident if they become public." Davies arrived at the palace within the hour, accompanied by representatives from MI5, the security service responsible for protecting national security. The presence of intelligence agents indicated that the theft had moved beyond a simple criminal matter into the realm of potential threats to British interests abroad. Dr. Pemberton led the group to a secure room where she had assembled copies and records of the stolen documents. The 3 items taken were all related to secret negotiations that took place during World War II, she explained. They contained detailed information about agreements between the British government and certain foreign powers that were never made public. She pointed to photocopies of the document's catalog entries. "This letter discusses financial arrangements with resistance groups in occupied Europe. This memorandum outlines a secret protocol for post-war territorial adjustments. And this document contains the names of individuals who provided intelligence to Britain during the war, some of whose families are still alive and could face retaliation if their identities were revealed." The MI5 agent, who had introduced himself only as Mr. Harrison, studied the information carefully. Any of these documents could be extremely damaging if released at the wrong time or in the wrong context. They could affect current diplomatic relationships and put people's lives at risk. Meanwhile, Princess Charlotte was struggling with the changes that had come to her daily life since the incident. Her movements within the palace were now restricted, her lessons had been moved to more secure areas, and she was constantly accompanied by protection officers. The freedom she had taken for granted was gone, replaced by careful supervision and security protocols. "I don't like this," she confided to her mother during lunch. "I feel like I'm in trouble, but I didn't do anything wrong. I just found someone who shouldn't have been there." Catherine sat down beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "You're not in trouble, sweetheart. The extra security is to keep you safe while the police work to catch the people who broke into our home. Sometimes when we do the right thing, it leads to complications that aren't our fault." "But what if I hadn't gone exploring?" Charlotte asked. "What if I had stayed in my lessons like I was supposed to? Then maybe none of this would have happened." "If you hadn't discovered that man," Catherine replied gently, "he might have stolen many more important documents, or he might have learned things about our family and our home that could have put us all in danger later. By finding him when you did, you helped stop something much worse from happening." This conversation was interrupted by Sergeant Morrison, who appeared in the doorway with an expression of urgency. "Ma'am, we need Princess Charlotte to look at some photographs. We may have identified the intruder." The photographs were shown to Charlotte in the security office, with her parents present and Detective Davies asking the questions. The images were surveillance photos from various locations around London, showing men who matched the general description Charlotte had provided. "That's him," Charlotte said immediately, pointing to the third photograph. "That's definitely the man I saw in the storage room." The identification was significant because it confirmed that the intruder was Marcus Webb, a former British intelligence officer who had left the service under suspicious circumstances 5 years earlier. His background in intelligence explained how he had been able to bypass the palace security systems so effectively. "Webb has connections to several foreign intelligence services," Mr. Harrison explained to Prince William in a private briefing. "His theft of these specific documents suggests that someone with detailed knowledge of the Royal Archives commissioned this operation. This wasn't random. Someone knew exactly what they wanted and where to find it." The investigation now focused on identifying Webb's current associates and discovering who had hired him for the palace break-in. International intelligence agencies were contacted, and a global effort was launched to track down both the stolen documents and the people behind the theft. During this intense period, Charlotte found an unexpected ally in Constable Sarah Mitchell, a young police officer who had been assigned to assist with palace security. Mitchell had a gift for talking to children and helped Charlotte process the confusing emotions she was experiencing. "It's normal to feel scared and confused when something like this happens," Constable Mitchell explained during one of their conversations. "You saw something dangerous, and now the adults have to work very hard to fix the problem. That can feel overwhelming, especially when it changes your normal routine." "Do you think they'll catch the bad man?" Charlotte asked. "I think they will," Mitchell replied honestly. "There are a lot of very smart people working on this case, and they have good clues to follow. But it might take some time, and until then, we need to make sure you and your family stay safe." Charlotte appreciated Mitchell's straightforward answers. Too many adults had been trying to protect her feelings by being vague about what was happening, but she was smart enough to understand more than they realized. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. Webb had made a crucial mistake during his escape from the palace. In his hurry to leave after Charlotte discovered him, he had dropped a small piece of paper near the service window he had used to enter the building. The paper contained part of a phone number written in a specific type of ink that forensic experts were able to trace to a particular manufacturer. This led to a shipping company in Eastern Europe, which led to a front organization, which finally led to the people who had hired Webb to steal the documents. The theft was commissioned by a group attempting to influence current trade negotiations between Britain and several European countries, Mr. Harrison explained to the royal family. They planned to use information from the historical documents to apply pressure during the negotiations, threatening to release embarrassing information unless they received favorable terms. The stolen documents were recovered during a coordinated operation involving British, French, and German intelligence services. Webb and 5 associates were arrested in 3 different countries, and the international conspiracy was disrupted before it could achieve its goals. But, for Charlotte, the resolution of the case brought mixed emotions. She was relieved that the dangerous people had been caught and that the stolen documents were safe. But she was also struggling with the realization that her home wasn't as secure as she had always believed. "Will something like this happen again?" she asked her father during a quiet moment in his study. Prince William considered his answer carefully. "We can't promise that nothing will ever happen again," he said. "But we can promise that we're doing everything possible to keep our families safe, and that if something does happen, we know how to handle it because of what we learned from this experience." He sat down beside her on the comfortable sofa. "What you did was very brave, Charlotte. You trusted your instincts, you made good decisions under pressure, and you helped protect not just our family, but also important historical information that belongs to the British people." "But I was so scared," Charlotte admitted. "When I saw that man and realized he wasn't supposed to be there, I didn't feel brave at all." "Being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared," her father replied. "Being brave means doing the right thing even when you are scared. And that's exactly what you did." The security improvements that resulted from the incident were extensive but necessary. New technology was installed throughout the palace, additional staff were hired and trained, and protocols were updated to prevent similar breaches in the future. Charlotte's daily routine slowly returned to normal, though with some permanent changes. She would always have more security than before, and her freedom to explore the palace alone was more limited. But she had also gained something valuable: the knowledge that she could handle herself in a crisis, and the confidence that came from having successfully protected herself and her family. The stolen documents were returned to the Royal Archives, where they were placed under enhanced security. Dr. Pemberton used the incident as an opportunity to review and improve the storage and protection of all historical materials, ensuring that future generations would be able to study and learn from these important pieces of British history. As life at Kensington Palace settled into its new normal, Charlotte often thought about the morning when she had wandered into the East Wing out of simple curiosity. What had started as a child's innocent exploration had uncovered an international conspiracy and led to important improvements in royal security. She had learned that sometimes the most ordinary days can suddenly become extraordinary, and that being a member of the royal family meant that even small actions could have big consequences. But she had also learned that she was stronger and braver than she had known, and that knowledge would serve her well in the years to come. The investigation files on the Webb case were eventually sealed and classified, but the lessons learned from Princess Charlotte's encounter with the intruder continued to influence palace security procedures for years afterward. Her quick thinking and brave actions had not only protected her family, but had also helped strengthen the security of one of Britain's most important institutions. 6 months after the incident that had changed everything, Princess Charlotte stood in the newly renovated East Wing of Kensington Palace, watching as workers put the finishing touches on what would become a modern security center. The corridors where she had once wandered alone were now equipped with state-of-the-art surveillance systems and motion detectors that could track every movement within the building. Dr. Pemberton approached her, carrying a tablet that displayed the digital catalog system that had been implemented for the Royal Archives. "Princess Charlotte," she said warmly, "I wanted to show you something special." The tablet screen showed a detailed entry for the historical documents that had been stolen and recovered. But what made Charlotte's eyes widen was the special notation at the bottom of each entry: "Security enhancement recommended by HRH Princess Charlotte following incident of March 15th. Your discovery that morning didn't just help catch the thieves," Dr. Pemberton explained. "It led to the most comprehensive update of our archival security in 50 years. These documents and thousands of others are now much safer because of what you found." Charlotte felt a warm sense of pride mixed with the soberness of understanding how serious the situation had been. In the months since the break-in, she had learned much more about the international implications of what had happened and the importance of the documents that had been targeted. The trial of Marcus Webb and his associates had concluded just 2 weeks earlier. Charlotte had not been required to testify in person, but her detailed statements had been crucial evidence in securing their convictions. Webb had been sentenced to 12 years in prison for espionage and theft, while his associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 8 years. Detective Inspector Davies had visited the palace the previous week to brief the family on the final resolution of the case. "The network that hired Webb was more extensive than we initially realized," she had explained. "Your daughter's quick actions didn't just prevent this one theft. They helped us uncover and disrupt an entire espionage operation that had been planning similar attacks on historical archives across Europe." The international cooperation that had developed during the investigation had led to new security partnerships between Britain and several allied nations. Information sharing protocols had been established to prevent future attempts to steal or manipulate historical documents for political purposes. For Charlotte personally, the experience had brought unexpected benefits along with the challenges. Her relationship with palace security staff had deepened into genuine friendships. Sergeant Morrison had become something of a mentor, teaching her about situational awareness and personal safety in ways that were appropriate for her age. "The most important thing you learned that day," he told her during one of their conversations, "wasn't about catching bad guys or protecting documents. It was about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong and knowing that you can handle difficult situations." Constable Mitchell had also remained involved in Charlotte's life, visiting regularly and helping her process the psychological impact of the experience. Through their conversations, Charlotte had developed a more mature understanding of security, privacy, and the responsibilities that came with her position as a member of the royal family. You know, Mitchell said during one of her visits, a lot of adults wouldn't have handled that situation as well as you did. You stayed calm, you observed important details, and you made smart decisions about when to run and when to call for help. The changes in Charlotte's daily routine had gradually become less noticeable as they became normal. The additional security measures were now just part of life, and she had adapted to the new protocols without losing her sense of independence and curiosity. Her relationship with her brothers had also evolved. Prince George, being older, now understood more about the serious nature of what had happened and had taken on a more protective attitude toward his sister. Prince Louis, still young, mainly knew that Charlotte had been very brave and had helped catch some bad people. The family had used the incident as an opportunity to discuss safety, responsibility, and the unique challenges of royal life in more depth with all three children. These conversations had brought them closer together and helped Charlotte feel less isolated by her experience. One afternoon, as Charlotte sat in the palace garden with her sketch pad, drawing the flowers that were beginning to bloom in the spring sunshine, her mother joined her on the bench. "How are you feeling about everything now?" Catherine asked gently. "It's been quite a journey since that morning in March." Charlotte considered the question seriously. "I think I'm glad it happened," she said finally. "Not the scary part, but everything that came after. I learned that I can be brave when I need to be, and I helped protect something important. And now our home is safer for everyone." She paused in her sketching and looked up at her mother. "Do you think I'll have more adventures like that?" Catherine smiled. "I hope not exactly like that one," she replied. "But I think you'll have many opportunities in your life to use the courage and good judgment you showed that day. Being a princess isn't just about ceremonies and public appearances. Sometimes it's about protecting people and standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult or scary." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Pemberton, who was carrying a leather-bound book. "Princess Charlotte," she said, "I have something I think you'll find interesting." The book was a newly compiled history of security incidents at royal residences throughout British history. Charlotte's experience had been included as a case study in how quick thinking and proper security protocols could prevent serious breaches. "Your story is now part of the official record," Dr. Pemberton explained. "Future security officers and palace staff will learn about what happened and how it was handled. In a way, you've helped train people to better protect the royal family for years to come." As Charlotte flipped through the pages of the book, she saw references to incidents dating back centuries, including attempts by foreign spies to steal documents during various wars and conflicts. Her own experience was placed in the context of a long history of people trying to use information against the British crown. "It makes me feel connected to all the other people who helped protect the royal family throughout history," Charlotte said thoughtfully. "Like I'm part of something bigger and more important than just one scary morning." That evening, the family gathered in Prince William's study for their weekly discussion of current events and family matters. These meetings had become more formal since the incident, as Charlotte's parents worked to ensure that all their children understood their roles and responsibilities in an age-appropriate way. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Pemberton showed me today," Charlotte said as they settled into the comfortable chairs around the fireplace. "About how my experience is now part of palace history and will help train future security officers." Prince William nodded. "That's one of the interesting things about being in our family," he said. "The things we experience often have implications beyond just our personal lives. What you went through and how you handled it will indeed help protect future generations of the royal family." "Do you ever regret going into that part of the palace that morning?" Prince George asked his sister. "If you had stayed in lessons, none of the scary stuff would have happened." Charlotte shook her head firmly. "No, I don't regret it. If I hadn't found that man, he might have stolen many more documents, or he might have learned things that could have hurt our family later. And all the security improvements might never have happened, which means something worse could have occurred in the future." Prince Louis, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "Charlotte was like a superhero," he declared. "She saved the day and caught the bad guys." Everyone laughed, but Prince William nodded seriously. "In a way, Louis is right. Charlotte did something very heroic that day. She stayed calm in a dangerous situation, made smart decisions, and helped protect not just our family, but also important historical documents that belong to all British people." As the months continued to pass, Charlotte found that the experience had given her a different perspective on her role as a member of the royal family. She understood more clearly that with privilege came responsibility, and that sometimes fulfilling that responsibility required courage and quick thinking. The security improvements at Kensington Palace had been completed, and the royal archives were now protected by some of the most advanced systems in the world. But Charlotte knew that technology alone wasn't enough. It also required people who were alert, observant, and willing to act when they noticed something wrong. She had begun to think about her future differently as well. Where once she had imagined her royal duties in terms of public appearances and charitable work, she now understood that service could take many forms, including protecting and preserving the institutions and traditions that supported British society. The stolen documents had been returned to their proper place in the archives, but they were now stored under enhanced security conditions that made them accessible to legitimate researchers while preventing any future theft attempts. Charlotte took pride in knowing that her actions had helped preserve these important pieces of British history for future generations. As she grew older, Charlotte would often think back to that spring morning when simple curiosity had led to such momentous events. The experience had taught her that ordinary moments could suddenly become extraordinary, that danger could appear in familiar places, and that she possessed reserves of courage and judgment that she hadn't known existed. Most importantly, it had shown her that being a princess meant more than wearing beautiful dresses and attending state occasions. It meant being prepared to protect and serve others, even when doing so required personal risk and sacrifice. The story of Princess Charlotte and the intruder in the East Wing would become part of palace legend, told to future generations as an example of how courage, quick thinking, and proper training could prevent disaster. But for Charlotte herself, it would always be remembered as the day she discovered who she really was and who she had the potential to become.